And a very happy Tuesday evening to all of you, Bills fans, football enemies. My name is Joe DeRosa. You can find me on Twitter at show_DeRosa. And that red light is on, which means this week's episode is officially live. And joining me tonight is the one and only Mike Bundt. He's sweet like Bundt cakes, but he burns hot like Bundt takes. And we are going to be going over the latest week of the news going on for the Buffalo Bills. And thankfully, they decided to be nice and give us a few fun things to talk about. So please, everybody, I want you to sit back, relax, enjoy yourselves. I appreciate you so much for being here. And without further ado, let's go.
Previous play will go under review.
All right. Once again, everybody, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate your time. If you could please do me a favor, do Mike a favor, do everyone at Cover One on planet Earth a favor, and drop a like on this video. It would be greatly appreciated. And as I said before, I am joined by the one and only Mike Bundt, friend of the show. You've been here before. I always appreciate your time, man. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. Always good to be back on Cover One. Excited to talk Bills football. It's been a little while for me since I've really gone in depth with you guys, and just excited to talk about free agency, the draft, and everything going on with this team.
Yes, sir. And we got a nice, fun week of news, thankfully, from this team. It was a bit of a slow start to free agency for the Bills. You know, nothing too crazy. They make a couple of moves that you're kind of like, all right, well, Mitch Trubisky, backup quarterback, sure. Taylor Rapp, bring him back. Then, of course, they do the Deion Dawkins extension. They retain Daquan Jones and AJ Epineza. They retain a few other free agents. And you're thinking like, all right, this is the steady free agency that we kind of expected, a little modest, but effective. And then this past week, we got a few more waves of news, one of the biggest being the signing of Curtis Samuel, Washington receiver, now turned Buffalo Bill. Mike, let's start off with this topic, and let's just go over things we like about it. And I'll ask you first, Curtis Samuel, I mean, what do you think about the signing in general, and what do you think his role is for this team?
I love the signing. To me, it was an obvious fit heading into the offseason. One of those guys where everyone basically discussed, we would love to see Curtis Samuel on the Bills. The question was, could the Bills afford a guy like Curtis Samuel? Well, they got it done. And what you're bringing in is a lot of speed, a guy that can get separation, and you can use in a lot of unique ways. Is he ever going to put up the stats where you get 1,000 yards, stuff like that? Probably not. But in a guy like Curtis Samuel, you can probably see around 90 targets in a season. You're going to get around 60 catches, anywhere from 650 to 800 yards. And I think he's another weapon that you can use in this offense. And you add him to a Stephon Diggs, a Khalil Shakir, a Dalton Kincaid, and James Cook in the backfield. And now you have something to work with. Obviously, he has familiarity with Bills offensive coordinator Joe Brady, had one of his best seasons when the two were in Carolina. So I think this is an exciting move going forward. And I will say this, I don't think it stops them from targeting wide receiver in the first or second round still. I know that's been a topic of discussion. Do you avoid wide receiver? No, I still think you can add wide receiver on top of Curtis Samuel in the current group. And if you go 3 wide, 4 wide, it can create some scary matchups for opposing defenses going forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is the biggest thing for me. Was I saw some people when it came to the signing kind of questioning it, only just because Curtis Samuel's role has been one that's been more of like two-way in the sense of slot and boundary, but really he thrives in the slot. And we have Khalil Shakir. We have some options that can man that role. So why do you bring in Curtis Samuel? For me, what I absolutely love about this is if you view it as not a replacement for Gabe Davis, but rather a replacement for Deontay Hardy, it should make you very encouraged, because what I felt like the Bills were trying to establish last year was getting a body that had speed, that had versatility, someone you could shoot upfield, but also was a menace when it came to underneath work. And I thought Hardy had that ability to kind of be that guy that they wanted, but ultimately didn't really live up to it. Where I think Curtis Samuel has thrived is the fact that he's played on some teams that haven't had the quarterback caliber that the Bills have had, but has still been very productive. And just to read off his 2023 stats, which I did have right in front of me and then happened to scroll up for some stupid reason, he wrapped it up with 613 yards, 4 total touchdowns. He also was targeted 91 times and caught 62 of his passes. So, I mean, there's production there. He was playing on a Washington offense that was wildly inconsistent. And where I think that role for the Bills is going to really thrive is the fact that you're going to have him on the field. You're going to be able to line up wide or be able to run him in the slot or have him work the middle of the field. And I just never think adding an extra target for Josh Allen is a bad idea. I mean, one that's been as consistently productive as Samuel, I think can only lend itself well to what this offense wants to do. And what I will say is you've seen Joe Brady kind of get very game plan specific, but ultimately try to work to improve the Bills' quick timing offense, work up the screens, work up those throws to the middle of the field, make things more quick and burstful so that when you're getting on first down, you can shorten the distance, shorten the chains, and ultimately help things out for your running backs. I think this is the perfect guy to do it. But Mike, I love the point you just made, and I want to ask you, to elaborate or just go a little further on it. But you said Curtis Samuel doesn't take them out of finding a receiver in the draft or maybe going a different direction. I mean, talk to me about that a little bit more. Like, what are your expectations with Samuel in this room for maybe what they would look for in the draft or what they would like to add to this offense still?
So I think it's entirely possible you can have 4 solid wide receivers on this unit, all contributing. Joe Brady, when he was at LSU, he implemented the spread quite a bit. I'm not saying he's going to just suddenly do 4 wides all the time, but I see no reason why you can't have 4 quality receivers. In no way do I think Khalil Shakir suddenly is out of the picture because you get a Curtis Samuel. They're going to find a way to use both Curtis Samuel and Khalil Shakir. And you can find another guy. You could go after a bigger guy. You could go after a deep threat still. You could still find a variety of different guys in the draft. But I look at it like this. Last year, when you looked at the Bills receiving core, you had Diggs, and then you instantly had questions at number 2 with Gabe Davis. I know we all talk up Gabe Davis's metrics. He was better than what a lot of Bills fans thought. But the fact is he was very inconsistent on a week-to-week basis. He had the ability to explode, but a lot of times he was a no-show, whether that's how he was game planned for the Bills or maybe he just wasn't being productive enough. But now that you have guys like Samuel and Khalil Shakir, they got that wiggle. They got that that ability to make plays underneath. If you can add, personally, one of the guys I would love is an Adonai Mitchell out of Texas. Tremendous athlete. I think he's going to be available in the late first round. That guy has immense upside and some size to add. I think that could create scary matchups for the Bills. I know a lot of people are talking about Brian Thomas Jr. out of LSU. Would love that idea. Don't know if he'll fall to 28, but I'm open to him. Even Troy Franklin out of Oregon. He's a guy I like. I know a lot of Bills fans are anti-Keon Coleman, but I think Keon Coleman does offer some valuable things that could.
He read you like a book, really, man.
I didn't even see that in the chat. I can't see the chat right now, but of course AJ would comment there saying that. I do think Keon Coleman would be a valuable piece because a lot of times when we go into this process of the draft, and everybody's like, oh, we need to replace Gabe Davis. They're thinking, well, we need to get a 1 and B. We need a receiver that can get 70 catches, 1,000 yards, 8 touchdowns. I now look at it as if you're going to have 4 strong receivers, starting with a Diggs, then going to whoever you draft, a Curtis Samuel, Khalil Shakir, you don't need a number 2 receiver that's going to get you 60, 70 catches, 1,000 yards, 8 touchdowns.
Right.
You need a number 2 receiver that's going to do his job. And if he does his job and you complement Curtis Samuel, Khalil Shakir, then you have Dalton Kincaid, Dawson Knox, James Cook, you're going to be able to spread teams out. I am more of a fan of where are we going to go this play? We could go to this guy, here, there, anywhere, then basically singling down on a few players. So I'm excited to see what they do going forward and how they end up implementing it. Because like I said, these receivers that are going to be available in the late first round, they offer a lot of different things to the table. So we'll really kind of get more of an idea of what the Bills are going to do offensively once we find out which direction they go.
For sure. You said it perfectly. And it's really funny because Steve is really good at guessing my next point. I know he doesn't do it deliberately, but Steve's awesome. He's a visitor of the show often, and he always somehow manages to comment exactly what I'm about to say. So I love leading with this comment. So shout out to you, Steve. I got to get you on this show one day. But I love the versatility of our receivers. I believe they all can play the slot as well as outside. No quote unquote one trick ponies in this group. I completely agree with that. And that's where I was going to go with it, and kind of to what you're saying. I think when Samuel got signed, there was concern about Khalil Shakir's role getting minimized. I don't think Khalil Shakir is going to have any less involvement. In fact, I still think he's going to be just as, if not way more involved than he was last season. But like Steve said, and like you've alluded to, and where I think this conversation should go is there isn't a one-trick pony. Now, I don't think Curtis Samuel is your answer for if you're looking for true establishment of wide receiver on the boundary. I do think the draft offers you many options there that could work a bit better if you're looking for the more traditional archetype, which I know some people don't believe in. But with Curtis Samuel, what you're offering to this offense is, like it's been said, like I just pulled up, versatility, giving this offense a chance to attack you in multiple ways with multiple weapons and multiple styles from multiple spreads, multiple sets. It's the way that you can kind of look at other teams around the league that have incredibly successful offenses, and they are a kaleidoscope. They're always changing their view. They're always making you guess, and they always have a threat for really every level of the field. I think right now, one of the things that I thought about when I saw this signing was, well, last season there were some struggles over the middle of the field. Josh wasn't trusting it, whether that was play calling, whether that was belief in who was there. I'm not 100% sure. I wasn't in the room. But what I will say is they are certainly making a concerted effort to make it more volatile in the middle of the field, and also not have to make Diggs work it as much, because where I felt like there were some issues in this Bills offense where it's great to have Stephon Diggs come down into the slot and be a bit of a kindling to try and work it, move the ball effectively. But you don't want to make Diggs be locked into that to have any sort of production. You want to be able to have multiple options that can make it work. And I think Shakir is one, but now Samuel gives you another, in addition to Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox, where there's really always a threat to, find themselves some space, get open in that spot. And what I want to also add is Curtis Samuel is great against man defense. And one thing you mentioned before, Mike, his ability to separate. They struggled against man coverage last year, and they're going up against some teams in their conference that are very good man coverage teams, like the Super Bowl champion Chiefs. Curtis Samuel can beat man coverage. And I want to read Matt Harmon's tweet about him from when it was signed. And shout out to Matt Harmon. Shout out to Thomas, who I believe is getting Matt Harmon on his show on Thursday night, by the way. So go check that out. But his reception perception profile, he has a 75.4% success rate versus man coverage. He's cleared 75% success rate versus man in all 4 seasons while he's been doing reception perception. And he has an 80% success rate versus zone, which was the best mark of his career. This is the 2023 stats. I mean, he runs a variety of routes. He can get open in zone and man. I know that for some people, the money might be a little but I love this move. I think he's great depth upgrade for Hardy, who probably won't be back with the team. And I'm very, very excited to see what they roll out. So, Mike, I want to ask you just any more thoughts on Curtis Samuel signing, any more thoughts on, anything we might not have touched yet?
Yeah, for me, I think it also indicates that there's going to be a shift in how this offense is run under Joe Brady next season. Entering last year, we were all focused on 12 personnel. It was obvious when they drafted Dalton Kincaid that they were going to try to run the ball out of that setup. They were going to try to get him involved, and they were going to do a lot of these 2 tight end looks. I don't think they're going to be as heavily reliant on that going forward. I think this shows that they're trying to get more answers to what opposing defenses were throwing at them in recent years, because even though the Bills were still near the top offenses in the NFL in scoring and yardage and all the metrics and analytics last year, it's clear that they were going through some struggles to basically generate explosive plays at times. And when you look at how opposing teams were defending the Bills, basically they took out Diggs and they were forcing their other wide receivers to step up. Now, at the end of the year, Dalton Kincaid essentially became the number 2 target, along with Khalil Shakir stepping up and being that 3-man, and Gabe Davis was relatively quiet down the stretch. You see Gabe Davis walk. Now I think you're going to see an offense that's heavily reliant on Dalton Kincaid. You're going to see Curtis Samuel. You're going to see Khalil Shakir. I think the passing game is going to be more efficient and will be able to open things up, because that was a huge struggle last year, was really generating plays downfield. And when you have a guy like Gabe Davis that essentially is a one-trick pony with his intermediate targets and his deep balls, they needed other ways to really open up and try to generate explosive plays. So I think Samuel is just one of the answers to help try to generate more big plays going forward.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I think one of the biggest victories of this, or I guess you could call it one of the biggest winners, is Stefon Diggs. I mean, it's not saying Stefon Diggs only has to be a deep threat, because part of the allure of him in your room is that you can move Diggs around. But now it's just not so much as a pressing need to have to get him to come down and work in the slot to get anything going, but rather we have other alternatives that can make this work. And now when Stefon Diggs, we can make him a chess piece. We can make him play explosively on the boundary. Or if we want to just do something tricky and maybe convince teams that he's going to go wide and go over the middle, we could do that. There's just so much more you can do when you have a body like Curtis Samuel in the room. I think it's a great signing. Again, I'm very for it. And I agree with really all the points you've made. I want to pull this comment up from, I think it's Raymond Taylor. So thank you for watching, Raymond. Appreciate your comment. And this is something to kind of segue back into the draft talk, but it's Raymond Taylor says, Steven Tasker and Chris Brown say we need a field stretcher for the deep pass, but at the same time, they say that the catch rate is low. So please explain what their point is. So I'm not sure if he means catch rate for like deep throws in general, like the success rate. But what I will say is, I do think they still need a true field stretcher. I do think that there's versatility with Curtis Samuel in the fact that, again, I said before, he runs a variety of routes. He can go upfield if you need to, but I think they do want to find that Gabe replacement in a way, because while it is good to have guys that can play both ways, I don't think Shakir or Samuel as pure deep threats, if you needed them to be, are going to be as reliable as one of these players that you could see working that more primarily, lining up wide more primarily in the draft. And whether that's an A.D. Mitchell, a BTJ, a Keon Coleman, if you fancy him, Xavier Leggett, I could go on. I feel like there are guys that have just been worked to that position a bit more, where you are coaching them up to really just navigate the outside and make that more of their role, so that with these other weapons you have that are going to be working underneath a bit more, it makes them, while maybe not doing as much in this offense, much more threatening, because now it just puts defenses in a bigger bind to have to defend a quality boundary target. So that's why I would do it. Mike, do you have any thoughts on this? Anything you'd like to add?
I want to address this point. So when you have guys that are more of a deep threat, yes, they're field stretchers, but a lot of times they're going to have a lower catch rate, because throws down the field, you have a lower chance of completing. So that was one of the things with Gabe Davis. Yes, he had his problems with his drops, but a lot of fans would point to his catch rate being the low 50s. Well, when you have a higher depth of target, you're going to complete less passes, because they're tougher to complete passes down the field. They're more difficult. Coverage makes it difficult. And then they're just lower probability throws. But what I am interested in, and this kind of is what I was alluding to earlier, when we refer to the number 2 wide receiver, we're not always talking about the number 2 target guy on a team. We're not talking about the guy that's going to get the second most yards. We're talking about the second boundary receiver. What I would love, and this goes along with what you were saying earlier, Joe, I would love them to draft that guy. Deep down, like I want a field stretcher. I want somebody that could continue generating big plays down the field. That's why I like Mitchell, Franklin, Brian Thomas Jr., those type of guys. But if they come into Buffalo, I don't anticipate them being the number 2 target guy, the number 3 target guy. I really think when you look at this Bills offense, it's pretty defined right now. Like Diggs is your number 1, Kincaid is your 2, Samuel or Shakir are probably your 3, 4. Heck, even if you draft a guy in the first round, the guy might be your 4th, 5th target guy. They might not even be that much farther ahead of James Cook. But if they have the ability to go deep, if they have the ability to make game-changing plays, you might take 30 catches for 550 yards and 3 or 4 touchdowns from a guy that's a rookie. And not to say that's the floor, but that's what we need to kind of finalize this offense. And Curtis Samuel, Khalil Shakir, they can do their things from the slot. Yes, you can move them around, but we need that field stretcher to really complete this offense and make it as dynamic as possible.
It almost feels like the missing puzzle piece, right? Because when you get someone that really slots themselves into that role, it's like, well, yeah, they got this, but who is their deep threat besides Diggs? Who can take the brunt off Diggs to go up north? And that's, to me, what they still need. But I will say this. I think fans, and, this isn't not anyone in particular, but something I've just noticed when we talk about wide receiver, I feel like we've set such an arbitrary, strict guideline when we think of wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3, for like what their metrics are going to look like, what the numerical data will show you at the end of a season. And what I will say is, I think if you throw that away and just view everyone's role as almost how are you helping this offense as a whole and how effective is it, I think that's going to make a lot of the discourse surrounding players a bit more peaceful. Because when I talked about Gabe Davis, my thing was I never expected Gabe Davis to ever have like 1,200 yards in a season. I was perfectly content with 750 to 900, but if he's doing his job, he's laying blocks down, he's the deep threat, and he's catching passes, then I think it's good. Where I'll say this about Khalil Shakir, Curtis Samuel, whoever they draft is, I feel like, we draft a Brian Thomas Jr., we draft an A.D. Mitchell. We're going to get into this conversation about, well, what do you want his yardage to be as a rookie? I'm expecting 1,100 yards. It needs to happen. It's like, if Brian Thomas Jr., A.D. Mitchell, Xavier Legette, whoever the hell it is, comes into this offense, has a defined role, gets to get on the field, does his job well, I'm cool with it. Like that's all I need to see. And that's how I feel about Khalil Shakir. That's how I feel about Curtis Samuel. That's how I feel about Diggs, Kincaid, everybody. Just give me production. Give me a defined role. Show me that when the ball gets thrown to you, you do something with it. And if you're not, and you're just having to block or do something intangible, like let me see that. And I'm okay with it, because I feel like we just box ourselves into wide receiver 2 needs to do this. Wide receiver 3 needs to do this. And I just don't think it ever really needs to be that way, because as long as the cogs in the machine are turning, man, and you have a productive offense, that's all you really need. So, Raymond, I appreciate this comment. Thank you for commenting. Mike, do you have any final thoughts on this before we move on to the next topic?
Yeah, totally agree with what you just said. The last thing I would say is I think it always depends on how much balance you have throughout a position, the depth of a position. So like last year, when it was clear the Bills didn't really have anybody at wide receiver 4, 5, 6 that could do basically anything. I know fans had hopes for Trent Sherfield. I had hopes for Deontay Hardy. When that became evident that they weren't going to contribute, then I would have liked to see more consistency and better results from a guy like Gabe Davis, because we needed him to step up to another level. On a team like this right now, where I think you go 3 deep right now and probably 4 deep after the draft, then the expectations don't need to be as high, because if you're surrounding, if you're basically spreading the wealth, then you don't need to have 1 or 2 singular players take over. It's like Miami. Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill have to go off every week because they don't have the options after them to carry the team. But in a situation like Buffalo right now, I think they could go 1, 2, 3, 4 and have any one of them have a big game on a weekly basis.
Mm-hmm. And another good comment here from Steve. With the 2 high safety looks we see, having versatile wide receivers is how you actually get behind the safeties, because they don't know what to expect. I don't want a guy that is just fast and could only go deep. And I get that. I think when I talk about the role, it's not so much saying like all they're going to do is go deep. More so like that's what they're going to be a specialist at. That's what they're going to be truly good at. But it is one thing where you don't want to have a one-trick pony. And I've talked about, like my reservations about someone like BTJ, because I felt like that's all he was. But at the same time, there is going to be a more of a lean on someone who could go upfield. And I think if you could find someone who's good at that, but has that, I guess if you want to call it the tools to be able to go across, to do a little bit different things when you need them to, then it is beneficial than rather than having someone who's like, who do you want to compare it to? Like a Chosen Anderson or like a Will Fuller, who's literally just send them. And it works sometimes. Like, don't get me wrong, it did work, but you want to have as many versatile weapons as possible, which is why, like, I've been one of those annoying Ladd McConkey stands, because to me, that's like someone who does do that. Your Keon Coleman hype, by the way, Mike, is my Ladd McConkey hype. Even though I don't think it's realistically going to happen now that they got Curtis Samuel, I'm still on that train, and I will be insufferable if they do it. So I'm just warning you all now. But let's carry the conversation on. And also, guys, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate all of you commenting. Please, please, please do me a favor and drop a like on this video again. It is greatly, 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 greatly appreciated. And I do have another topic coming up. But before we do, I have a message for all of you and for you too, Mike. It's from Greg and Aaron. I have them on the other line, and they want to tell you about what is it? The one pass guy? Okay. All right. I'll let them do it. Greg, Aaron. I got to find the file. Damn, there it is. What do you got?
Many people ask us the best way to support us here at Cover One, and that is to sign up to become a Cover One Pass member. That contribution helps give us the access to all the data and information we use to create the content that you love.
And I think most importantly, brings you into our community of insiders. It's a great community based on Slack. I know a lot of people don't want to be on social media anymore or be in on those conversations. We bring all of it to you right in our great community of educated fans. And most importantly, you get access to our content creators.
Even better than that, everybody loves merch. You get awesome t-shirts, a cool decal, and a letter from the Cover One team signed directly to you.
All for $60. That gets you the entire season, next year's free agency and draft. $60. Click the link in the description. Cover One Insider. Become one today.
Yes, yes, yes. Become one today for just 60 gold doubloons, $60, 60 crescent shards. You can become a One Pass member. That One Pass is the lifeblood of Cover One. It allows us to have access to all of the resources that we use on a week-to-week, day-to-day, minute-to-minute, second-to-second basis, including all of the data, all of the film, and all of the other things that we can do to provide the content to you, the viewer, the listener, the reader. We appreciate anyone who signs up, and I want to let you know that there is a little bit of a contest going on right now. You can sign up for a One Pass, and you will have the chance to win some awesome prizes, including a PS5. I am not joking. Go check Greg's Twitter. We would not lie about something like this. We are truthful men. We would never deceive you. But let's continue with the show, Mike. And for all of you, thank you again for being here. And I want to talk about the next biggest news that we got this past week, at least in my opinion. And that's the Bills extending Taron Johnson for 3 years, $31 million. They locked down their 28-year-old nickel corner, literally $1 million more than the Kenny Moore signing, which I thought was hilarious. And Greg called that. So, I mean, Mike, let's just talk about this. What do you think about this move?
Love it. I don't know how you can't love him. Great player, probably one of the best nickel corners in all of football. If not the top, he's one of the top three. Second team All-Pro this past season. The guy has been a critical part of this Bills defense for the last few years now. And I feel like a lot of people still don't give him the credit that he truly deserves. Obviously, people look back to the interception against Baltimore in the playoffs, the interceptions against Pittsburgh, Kansas City. So he's made a lot of big plays in the past, but I still don't think there's a lot of not with the Cover One base. Obviously, a lot of your audience here knows about what he brings to the table, but just the fan base in general, I still think there's a lot of people that don't realize what he necessarily does on the football field and how valuable he is. But I'm excited. This keeps him in Buffalo, and that's an important part to have on this team when you're going to be losing three crucial members of the secondary going forward.
Yeah, it was an integral move. I mean, not even just for the salary cap purposes to clear up the space, but to also just lock down one of the most important players on your defense. We can talk about it all we want, but I don't think it does enough justice to just how important Taron Johnson is to this defense. I mean, if you want to talk about Matt Milano, if you want to talk about, I can't even think of anyone else who I would say is on the same magnitude. He is the backbone of what they're able to run. With how good he is as a nickel corner, they're able to get away with so much more schematically on their defense. And I think you couldn't ever afford to have even the slightest thought of losing that. So locking him down, getting ahead of it, he's still young. I know there's some concerns about concussions, but being able to retain this player, being able to continue to build upon the scheme that you founded since McDermott's been here and since you drafted him, and being able to get him for, it is is the biggest nickel corner contract in the league, but I think every penny is very, very much deserved. It's a no-brainer to me. I'm really glad that they did it, and I'm really freaking excited to just see Johnson back in Buffalo, playing on that money, seeing what he could bring to a defense that's really going to need the veteran presence, especially like you said, Mike, after losing Poyer, after probably losing Micah Hyde and losing Tre'Davious White. There has to be a new voice of veteran presence in that secondary, in that defense. And while, yes, we've had guys who have been here, and yes, we've had guys who are older, like Von Miller, that obviously have played in the league, have a pedigree, Taron Johnson is an original Bill. He's someone that's been in Western New York, drafted by the team, never went anywhere, has been with McDermott all this time. You're talking about having a voice for rookies and having a voice for potential free agents in the secondary that could be coming in. This is the guy that I think is just an absolute integral piece, and I am super, super happy that they have kept him. I mean, really, what else can be said? Mike, what do you think? Any more thoughts on this?
Yeah, the leadership part is critical to me. We are talking about a secondary with a lot of new players that are going to be taking over this season. I know Rasul Douglas, part of the team last year, Christian Benford, but those are even relatively new guys to this secondary overall. So a voice like Taron Johnson, he might be the leader of that secondary going forward. He's the guy that has the most tenure of the key starters on the defense in the secondary right now. So I think it was critical, and I'm excited to see what he can do going forward. I actually have his autograph back on this side. I'm pointing in the wrong direction, but the Bills, the wooden Bills thing, it's really hard when you're in front of the camera to point to the right area.
Yeah, it always throws me off too.
Yeah, but I'm excited. I've met him before. I've talked to him. I know that being in Buffalo has always been an important thing to him. And coming from a small school, he's always kind of had this proven mentality.
Right.
And coming to the Bills, he is the example that we always talk about when we talk about Bills culture, doing things the way Sean McDermott preaches. And it's a good thing to have him back on this defense.
And I just love seeing the effort to try and lock down your homegrown talent, right? Like we've seen it with so many players in the past. You saw it with Ed Oliver's contract last year, obviously, Josh. But Deion Dawkins extended, Taron Johnson extended, like all of the work that they did with Trey White in the past, just the effort to try and keep their players where they are and get ahead of it. That's the thing that I love this organization for, is the fact that they will be willing to ride or die with their young guys, but also the players that have been foundational components. There was never a thought about, like, I never had any sort of thought that they were ever going to let Johnson go anywhere. Like, it never crossed my mind. I thought an extension was significantly more likely than them ever letting the contract play out and getting younger there, even if he is, nearing 30 with some injury history, just because they have given us a model of how they treat quality young talent. I think the same thing is going to be said for guys like Gregory Rousseau in a couple of years, Christian Benford in a couple of years. It just is always so encouraging to me that they love just the opportunity to find guys that they want to mold into these significant roles and never let them go. Because you've seen so many players around the league that ultimately they can't work out a contract with them. They never set it up the right way, and then they end up going for big money. I mean, I could even point to Christian Wilkins right now, who just got a huge contract, well-deserved. He's one of the best DTs in the league, but Miami just let a foundational homegrown player go. And I just never want to fathom that. And I know it's not always possible. There's always going to be a situation where someone's got to go. Gabe Davis just did. I'm not blind to that. But I know damn well that at the very least, when they value someone, they're going to try and get ahead of it before they could ever have the opportunity to go. Taron Johnson is a Buffalo Bill for the next 3 years, maybe for the rest of his career, and I'm very happy with it. Any other thoughts, Mike?
No, not really. Just continuity is important in this league. And when you spend years developing guys in your organization that you drafted, you are homegrown players, there's a reward by keeping them and getting that production as they get to the later years of their careers. And I think that's a big part of the Bills' success. Obviously, Josh Allen is the largest role, but I think a big part of their defense has been to be able to grow these guys and to keep them in Buffalo for a sustained period of time. Going back to when they drafted Trey, they brought in guys like Milano, Bernard, Ed Oliver. It goes on and on. There's been a lot of homegrown talent in this Bills organization. And I think that plays a huge role in why they've been successful on the defensive side of the ball as long as they have been.
Yep. And again, when you talk about Sean McDermott, and this is the thing that I also love about it, you need the veteran voice too, because if they are actually going to modify things on the defense, I know Mark Brown just asked this question, which is, does the Bills making Taron Johnson the highest paid nickel mean that they will stay in nickel all the snaps still? They're a base nickel defense. That's never changing. But they are, I do think, going to implement some wrinkles that look a little different, whether that's base, whether that's one high, whether that's things that they don't run as often that they might lean on a little more. What's good about Taron Johnson being in that room is, again, someone who's been there, someone who's worked with McDermott. It's almost like you've been at a company for a few years and they're rolling out some new processes or new workflows and you have to train someone. And even though it's a bit new to you or a little bit different to you, you have a familiarity with the company you work in that you can help people acclimate to this a little bit easier. I think Taron Johnson, again, extending him, locking him down, and establishing that he's going to be a presence. Because I honestly think this man could end up with the C on his chest. Like that's something that I just, again, I'll praise the move as much as I can. He's worth every bit of it. When I saw Moore get 30 and Greg say 31 or 30.7, I was like, that's probably what's going to happen. And he definitely called it, and he called it. So Taron Johnson, glad you're in Buffalo for 3 more years. Let's talk about another move, a sneaky fun signing that I was very happy about. I think a lot of fans were also on this boat. I don't think too many people were against this, but that's Ty Johnson. And this was a move that I thought was a sneaky great signing for the Bills, because you bring in this guy midway through the year. He's making vet minimum. He gets cut from the New York Jets. He bounces around. He comes to Buffalo. And then he not only has significant moments, but really a defined role in the second half of the year in Joe Brady's offense. And there was this sneaking part of me that was like, would they bring him back, or are they just like, they used him for half a year, they like what they did, they're going to go try to find someone else who maybe they feel does it better? But then they sign him. Now he's a part of the team again and had, a lot of production at the back half of last season and maybe poised for a bigger role this year. So Mike, talk to me about Ty Johnson. What do you think?
Yeah, I love the addition. I was hoping they would bring him back. I know a lot of people have been talking about him as RB3 or a low end 2. I honestly thought he complimented James Cook really well last season. I would be okay with him being the number 2 running back. I know I'm probably in the minority saying that, but I don't really think there's really a need to upgrade much beyond what Ty Johnson is. The Bills were at their best when it was James Cook and Johnson in the backfield. And I know Murray had good moments last year. I know that the Bills have kind of gone through their share of backup running backs in recent years. I'm perfectly okay with Ty Johnson being the number 2. Now, if the Bills see somebody in the draft in the 4th round, 5th round, and they want to bring some competition and then they relegate Ty Johnson to the number 3 spot, okay, whatever, I'm fine with it. But from what I saw last year, I'm perfectly okay if he gets the backup job. Would not care if they went a different direction, but I hope he gets a shot at it.
I think he did good enough last year where they probably have considered it. I do think that I think Ty Johnson is almost like the best of both worlds between a speed back and a power back, because he has like a little bit of both in his game. Like when you watch him, he could tank somebody and move up the middle of the field, but he's also just really freaking fast and also a great backfield catching option. So I do like that idea of maybe giving him a chance to try and have that too. But I'm kind of in this mindset of, I really like the role he had as the 3. I like the fact that you could sprinkle him in from time to time, move him around, get him involved in screens, hand the ball off if you want the teams to kind of just like be, I guess if you want to call it, caught off guard by the fact that you're giving him the ball. That's one of the things about him that I thought he did well. And I believe I have a little bit of concern if they were to make him the full-time 2. I don't think he'd be necessarily bad in that role. I do think I'd like to see them consider it, but I thought he just did best as a 3. I thought the role was cut out for him. I thought Joe Brady had plans for him and involved him in the game in kind of a tasteful, not pushing it too much to the point where we're like, why is he on the field? But rather finding the moments where Ty Johnson could thrive and really, whether it's the defense showing you a certain look, maybe they're set up for a run and you throw a sneaky screen and he's got room to run. Like those are the things to him that I was excited for about Nyheim Hines that unfortunately we never got to see, that I think he inherited and did quite well. While I don't think it's outlandish to say maybe he'll try for the 2, maybe they could consider it, I think I'd still like a little bit more of like a what they were trying to find in Latavius Murray and Damian Harris, which is that power back style, someone who's really a true bruiser, a true hit you where it hurts and just mow you over kind of guy. I know there's options like that in the draft. I know I've talked about a few of them when we did our free agency episode. I don't know if Ty Johnson in a full-time RB2 role is what I would want as much. And it's not a knock on him. It's not me saying anything negative. I think he's been great for the Bills. Just more so that I think there's a better fit for that role, and I'd rather Johnson be sprinkled into both. So
that's
I mean,
fair, but it is important to basically point out he won the RB2 job at the end of the season. He was ahead of Murray at the end of the year against Dallas. 9 carries, 54 yards. He had 5 for 22 against New England, 5 for 19 against Kansas City. I know these numbers aren't standout numbers or anything. 6 for 19 against Philly. Like, he was getting around 5+ carries a game down the stretch. Against Pittsburgh, 8 carries. Against Kansas City, 7 carries. So down the stretch, he was becoming the guy ahead of Latavius Murray. And I understand, like, he's never been in that spot where he's been the primary backup, where he's gotten that amount of carries. I just don't want a big guy just for the sake of having a big guy. We saw Damian Harris, we saw Latavius Murray. They were both all right in their time with the Bills. I just don't think that we have seen from the Bills during the past few years, when they go after a bigger guy or they go after someone that they want to have as a power back, really have the success that they have aimed for. We've been talking the last 2 years about, we want Josh Allen to run less. We want a bigger back to take those goal line carries, to take those short yardage carries. And what do we always come back at? If it's a 3rd and 1, or if it's 3rd and goal at the 1, pound Josh Allen.
right.
And maybe that's not sustainable as Josh Allen gets older. But Josh had 15 rushing touchdowns last year. I don't see that really changing where he's going to suddenly be under 7-8 touchdowns running. So if Josh is always going to be the guy that gets it in these short yardage situations on QB sneaks, tush pushes, or QB powers, I don't really know if you need to have a power back be your number 2 running back. Why not just have the guy that might be more skilled that offers a little bit of both? I mean, we're not talking about a backup running back that's going to get 10 carries a game. We're talking about a guy that most games might get 5 carries.
I think you said it before, though, and that's kind of a big thing for me, too. The wear and tear on Josh. He's 27 years old right now. I think he's actually about to be 28. And while, yes, you can get away with it for now, I feel like, while I do think Josh is an absolute freak and he takes hits and he gets up and he's able to be fine, you're not going to live in that world forever. That's just not a sustainable model for me. And while I do see your point about having a more skilled back, I think the power back is necessary, because I don't think Josh Allen 15 rushing touchdowns is going to be something you can count on for 10 years. I think, yeah, maybe the next couple of years it could work. It could be fine, but I don't want to keep putting him through that much physicality. Like, while I know he loves it, I know he's talked about it, the fact is he's your franchise quarterback. He is the thing that keeps this whole operation together. I don't want to continue to put him in more binds if we have the opportunity to add an archetype at running back that when we get to 3rd and 1, when we get to the goal line, we have a younger, and I want to stress younger because Latavius Murray, I thought actually started out the season well, but was on the older side and definitely didn't play to what he would have played if he got him, as a rookie. I think having a younger, experienced, or even a draft power back to take that role away from Josh is something that I think could be beneficial. And also, even if you're one of those people who's like, well, Josh having the ball is effective, he makes it work, he scores touchdowns, you also don't have to stop doing that outright. I'm not saying eliminate it altogether and force Josh to never run at the end zone, to force Josh to never have a QB sneak. I'm just saying that finding the balance of someone who's effective in those short yardage roles or in those goal line roles, while also mixing in different looks, whether that's fakes where Josh Allen rolls right and is able to score that way, whether that's, some sort of option where maybe it's not looking good and he's able to keep the ball in his hands. Those are things that I think are absolutely beneficial, but also makes the Bills offense less predictable, makes them, I don't want to say the offense doesn't have to worry about defenses selling out as much to just try and stop Josh, and also avoiding these scrums where now Josh might have to dive, might have to go underneath, might get trucked in a certain way where you just never know when that hit is going to be the one that makes you really regret ever putting him in that spot. And I think that's why, for me, even though I understand your point about Latavius Murray, I just disagree on that because I think having the power back will be beneficial for Josh's long-term health, but also the effectiveness of your play calling in those spots. So that's where I'll leave it. But Mike, you got any more thoughts on this?
I just have one counter. So
you're good. Keep going.
Kind of like the receivers where we're saying, okay, you can label 2, 3, 4, but they all might have random target shares. They might all produce around the same level. That's kind of where I am with Ty Johnson. Okay, you get the power back. Maybe you call the power back the number 2. Maybe Ty Johnson's the 3. At the end of the day, they're probably getting around the similar amount of carries. I don't really care what you name number 2, number 3. If they're both getting anywhere between 4 to 6 carries a game in a given game. Now, the one thing
I got to stand on my point too. I'm sorry to interrupt. I should stand on my point too, because I did just say this about wide receiver. Maybe going 3-2 is a bit too arbitrary, but my point being more so someone with a more physical skill set and Ty Johnson. That's what I'm trying to kind of get at.
Yeah, I'm completely fine with adding another running back that's more physical. If you want to call him the 2, you want to call Ty Johnson the 3, that's fine. If you want to flip it around, completely fine with that as well. One thing I will add, though, a big reason why the Bills struggle, not the Bills struggles, but why a lot of these teams struggle in short yardage situations with running backs is when you're the Bills, you're so used to passing it all the time. You have such a pass-focused offensive line. Sometimes you get in these short yardage situations, you just don't have the line that's necessarily always constructed to get that yard. And because Josh is your biggest body, I know we don't want him to get hit. Sometimes he just is the best running back in that situation. It sounds crazy, but like Josh says that he's 240 plus. You're not going to see many running backs that are going to be at his size and physicality. So even though we don't want Josh to take those hits, we have to sometimes just accept he is your best chance at converting in those situations. Do they have to reduce it over time? Yes. But I will tell you this. I think we saw a little bit last year. When you take the running away from Josh, you also take other things away from the Bills offense that makes it more predictable and can also take away some of the scariness of it. I will always be a proponent that Josh needs to run the ball because the fact of it is that is what makes Josh one of the scariest quarterbacks in the league. If you made Josh just a pocket passer right now, where say he ran for 100, 200 yards a year, I don't think we're talking about a top 3-4 quarterback in that situation. I think he is a top 3-4 quarterback because of the combination of running and passing.
And I fully agree with that. And I want, if anyone's watching the show live, listening later, watching later, please don't think my takeaway is stop running with Josh Allen. Not you, Mike. You're not saying that either. I know you're not saying that. I completely understand where you're coming from. I love our civil disagreement here live on the air. I love that we can disagree at things and have a great conversation. You're never allowed back. I hate you. But when we talk about this conversation, I'm fully in agreement. You got to keep running with Josh. It's a huge part of his game. That's what makes him so dynamic. I just think there are opportunities to reduce the hits and make his running more effective and not have to use it because you're panicking to get, any production in these situations, but rather like, okay, we have a dependable back that's actually able to bruise these people, get us some opportunity, whether it's short yardage, goal line again, but now we can also mix in Josh's running to be effective while it's not something that if we don't do it, we have no opportunity to score in short yardage or be able to get first downs. That's kind of where I'm going with it. I see your side completely, totally fair. And
we're much closer than what this conversation, like you and I we're pretty close to this. We're arguing over like the smallest little difference, but we're
the
pretty
smallest. No, but I completely see where you're coming from. And I agree with Thomas's point here. Give Joe a thumbs up because his internet is terrible and you don't want the stream to end. Well, I do. My internet is fine when I'm plugged in and I'm hardwired. I should let all you know my setup right now. So my PC is coming very soon. I'm very excited. But right now I'm running off a Mac and I have an Ethernet cable that goes in to the router directly. That's how I'm able to stream live and not have any issues. When I am not plugged into that router, it's bad in this room, man. I don't know why. My roommates have no problem with it, but I have a problem with it for some reason. So that is where the internet is terrible jokes coming in. When Thomas and I are in spaces, I'll go in the blender every now and then, and he has never let me live it down. He will never, ever let me forget that. But Thomas, I appreciate your message, guys. Again, thumbs up. Appreciate it. Mike, we're on the home stretch of this show, so I want to wrap it up with just a couple of things. But let's start with the signing that happened out of freaking nowhere. There were no leaks, no agent reports. Straight up, the Bills just told us this happened, and we were like, oh, all right, sure, that's a death piece. Casey Toohill has signed with the Buffalo Bills. The former Washington Commander signed a 1-year contract. He racked up 5 sacks last year. Mike, thoughts on this one? What do you think about this signing for the room?
Nice depth signing. He had 5 sacks last year. Really the first time he really produced at a decent level in the NFL. I think he'll be a quality backup for the Bills. Not expecting too much, but he is a guy that is coming off the best year of his career, and hopefully he can provide some solid depth as a backup on the Bills.
Yeah, I don't have really too much more to add to this, as much as like I was wondering if this team was going to go for Shaq Lawson again. I still kind of wonder if they did, because I liked what Shaq brought last year as a rotational D end. I thought he was solid in run defense. I thought in his limited opportunities in pass rush, he had some moments. I mean, he brought a sack on Mahomes. He was big in that KC game, and I liked having him there. But this kind of signals to me that they are moving on from Lawson, and that Toohill might be their new rotational piece. And I mean, you know, big boy, 6'5", he's got wide arms. I mean, I guess for me, it's just like if you had to sub somebody in, this is a guy who could do it. I don't think it's really much more. Kind of like in the Nicholas Morrow category of like, all right, it's a body for the room. Let's see if they make it through camp and they're good enough to be a rotational option. But shout out to the Bills for being the most secretive about Casey Toohill signing. Flew under the radar. No one saw it coming. I remember Judge literally sent us a message today and was just like, oh. I was like, oh, okay, that's a guy. That's a body, sure. But welcome to the Bills, Casey. I'm excited to see what he brings. And hey, could be an unsung hero. Could be a huge gem. This guy could be more than a rotational piece. We're just going to have to see. But Mike, let's go to the final topic tonight. It's something that I think is, you know, it's speculative right now. We don't have any news about this yet, as much as we've just seen it and the Bills making an effort at this position. But the 2 safety visits that they've had so far with Julian Blackmon from the Colts and Mike Edwards from the Kansas City Chiefs. Obviously, we know we do not have Poyer and Hyde here anymore. They retain Taylor Rapp. There's obviously prospects in the draft that are, it's a pretty, I would say, a pretty deep class. But talk to me about these visits, who you like more, what it means for the team, just really any general thoughts you have on it.
Yeah, so I like Blackmon. I would be all for signing him. What I want to caution to a lot of Bills fans is not to overreact to what's going on at safety right now. I think a lot of Bills Mafia is all going kind of psycho right now about we need Justin Simmons. We should have gone after Cameron Curl. Like all of these guys, like, no, we don't. We really don't. Safety is an important position, but I really get the sense, and I felt this way with Terrell Bernard last year. If you go back in the shows, I'm sure you can find some of our takes, me and Kevin. And I kind of felt this way about when it came to Spencer Brown. Sometimes I just have these feelings, and sometimes they happen, sometimes they don't. I feel like safety is one of these spots right now where they don't think they need to have an impact player, where they believe they can get your middle cheap free agent and get solid production. You can get a second round pick and develop them into somebody that'll be serviceable. I'm a big believer that the Bills coaching staff believes in scheme over necessarily high-end talent. Mm-hmm. And when you look at the Bills defense, especially in the secondary and the guys that they have plugged and placed over the years, there's a lot of evidence that shows the Bill. You should trust who the Bills put back there. You should trust their scouting, their evaluation. I don't want to mean this to any disrespect to any players on the Bills, but before Jordan Poyer came to Buffalo, nobody in Buffalo knew who he was. He had made zero impact in the NFL, and it was a complete shock in 2017 when he went off. When Micah Hyde had come to Buffalo, he was a nickel corner, made plays, he got a solid contract. Nobody thought he was about to become a 2-time All-Pro safety. Both those guys revolutionized the Bills' defense. Even like you look at the other DBs. We're talking about a defense that has found a way to get starting production out of a 6th-round pick in Christian Benford, Dane Jackson, a UDFA in Levi Wallace. They They brought in guys like EJ Gaines and made him look like
he was nasty when he was out there.
Yeah, his first year in Buffalo after the trade went off. Even Kevin Johnson had a good season here. You get Rasul Douglas, who was having a good year, and he ends up having a great year after he finishes with Buffalo. The secondary, no matter who they've had, where throughout the secondary, they've had elite production. So I truly believe a lot of it is scheme.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it is scheme and what they have. So I don't think they feel the need that we have to sign a safety for $7, $8, $9 million a year to replace what we have in Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde. I truly believe they brought Rapp in last year on that minimal deal, basically telling him, there's probably a good chance that Poyer and Hyde might be gone next year.
Mm-hmm.
You're not getting the looks that you want. Come join us. We're going to be a contender. Try to win a Super Bowl with us. And if one of them leaves, you will have a chance at getting that job. And now, next to Rapp, I think second round, third round pick, you can get a guy that can come in right away that will be able to contribute. And I did see the one comment there about serviceable. I think we have to, when I say serviceable, I'm not saying the person's going to come in and be a detriment. I think we say time for more all-stars. We got to realize the whole Bills defense has been all-pro players their career. You have Von Miller, former all-pro. You have Matt Milano, former all-pro. You have Hyde, you have Poyer, you have Trey, all-pros. You had 5 all-pro players. You don't need to have all-pro players scattered throughout your defense to be a great defense. You need your guys to do their roles and guys that you need to trust. It's fairly obvious when you watch the Bills and how the players they go after on different spots on their defense. They look for certain traits and they look for certain physical characteristics. Mm-hmm. If they can get a guy that meets the traits physically and mentally that they want, they'll be perfectly fine. And I don't think there's going to be some crazy drop-off. Your defense isn't going to go from being a top 5 scoring defense to suddenly allowing 27 points a game because you put it in a rookie safety. Right. If that suddenly happens, it's because the rest of your defense decided just fell apart. They can survive having one less than stellar player at the safety position.
Yeah. So where I think I agree with you is I think that this move, whatever they do, if they go for Julian, if they go for Mike Edwards, whoever it is, I do think that I have faith that this is a very tactical approach from the coaching staff, from the organization, of someone that they truly believe is a scheme fit. You're obviously not going to go out and get anybody there. This is a person that you see the upside for. And as far as Julian Blackmon, he's raved about by Colts fans, Colts writers, and played a lot of single highs. So if you're talking about that transition into more of that in this defense, more of those
he's
looks.
Not a bargain. That guy's not a bargain basement. You get a Blackmon, you feel if you get if it's Blackmon and Rapp, and I'm sorry to cut you off.
All good.
If it's Blackmon and Rapp as your 2 safeties, this isn't suddenly looked at as, you got 2 low-end safeties. No, you got a former second-rounder in Taylor Rapp. I believe he was a second-rounder who has started in this league with the Rams. And then you have Blackmon, who has started in this league for the Colts. You replace 2 starters with 2 other starters. And if you go based on history, the Bills, when they got Poyer Hyde, they saw something in them that fit their system, that was able to bring out the best in them. I think that this coaching staff deserves the benefit of the doubt with how they have treated Matt Milano, with how they treated Terrell Bernard, with how they have treated Christian Benford and all these other guys throughout their defense, that they know what they need to fit the defense. And basically what I'm saying is sometimes we get so obsessed with production on other teams that we don't analyze the player's situation, what type of system they were in, who is their coaching staff, what they were asked to do. Because sometimes there might be a guy with lesser production, but if he gets put in the right system, you can get a much higher ceiling with that guy than someone else who might have been in a different system, had a good year, then comes to your system and maybe isn't a fit. So
Yeah.
I'm trusting that Bean and McDermott know what they're looking at right now. And yes, with the cap situation, they can't exactly go after the cream of the crop. They have to be a little bit smart with how they go about it.
Yeah, and I think you got to look at Micah Hyde. I mean, when he was in Green Bay, he was already slated to be a safety, but they kind of used him in both ways, and there was never really a marriage to either having him as the starting safety. He was usually playing a lot of slot corner because he was behind people and, in that role. And then he comes over to Buffalo and people see this two-way style, but then he comes over to man the center field and be that free safety. And they got the best out of him for doing it. I agree with you there. I think that these are intentional looks. These are intentional visits. These are guys that they really do believe are someone that we can plug in to be this, whether we need them to be a center field navigator, whether it's someone who's aggressive enough to work well in the box. Like, that's why they brought back Rapp. That's why they brought in these guys for visits. And really, I think, you could pick your poison, or pick your poison is more of a negative term, but like choose your favorite as far as these two guys coming in and which one you'd rather have to be kind of your high tier, but more like a, how do I describe this? The word's escaping me, but maybe a serviceable option that I think you can build on in the draft. And that's kind of what I'm viewing this as, and what I think more people should view it as, is this safety signing potentially isn't who I think is going to ultimately be like the said and done final addition to that room. I do think that this is all setting up for bringing in a young, maybe even two young safety prospects in this draft. So for me, I'm looking at this as like, all right, Julian Blackmon or Mike Edwards, who do I like? Well, Blackman's younger. He's played a lot of single high, but he's got a lot of injuries. So they're probably going to have to throw some sort of like incentive-based contract at him, and hopefully it works. And if it does, you're going to get great production, because Blackmon had insane production this year before he went down with the injury. He was poised to have a career year. So I think with that in mind, I understand your point. I definitely think that I trust this room, this coaching staff, to work these guys up. If they're players that might not be seen as on the same tier as Justin Simmons, but their scheme fits. If you could just find someone who has experience, has the ability to play in your scheme, has played well in whatever team they were playing on, then I think you're going to be all right, especially if you're implementing some young talent, where I think in addition to the veterans, you get a mix of young guys with experience, guys that are coming in, learning your scheme, and ultimately going to be able to be a productive secondary. I will say this. I fully expect there to be some semblance of regression on the back end. I do. I just think when you've been relying on Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde for as long as you have, I think it's essentially inevitable. I'm not saying it's going to be 32nd in the league, absolute worst safety room. Like it's an embarrassment. It's bad. But I think it's okay to say, hey, it's probably going to be a bit of transition if we do go with an Edwards, Blackmon, and then we implement Rapp as a rotational piece. And then we have, Cam Kitchens or Tyler Newman or Javon Bullard, whoever it may be in this draft, coming in to play their role. I think there is going to be a small amount of drop off, and it's okay, because ultimately you're seeing the bigger picture of they're working up to reestablish that room. And I see some Taylor Rapp comments in the comments. Should have used a different word. He wasn't great to start the year, but I thought he improved as the year went on. I know there's concerns about him in coverage, but I do really believe Taylor Rapp is an option to just fill in and maybe be another box defender, or maybe if someone's got to, come out for a blow or a breather or whatever it may be, he's the guy to fill in. I don't think Taylor Rapp is going to be your starting safety. I do believe that they're going to continue to put him in that role where they mix him in and then add in a young talent in the draft. I just want to keep establishing that. That's my viewpoint, and that's what I view these moves as. But when it comes to veteran presence, I'm fine with bringing one of these guys in. I think the coaches can coach him up. My main concern with Julian Blackmon is really just staying healthy. I hope he can. Mike Edwards is another person I wanted. Again, played in a really freaking good defense, has a lot of experience in a man system. Like this is a guy that I'm totally comfortable bringing in. And both of these guys are under 28, so that's a win.
Yeah.
So
and I just don't want people to suddenly think if they sign Julian Blackmon that they're getting this stud safety. Like, maybe it'll turn out and he'll be a great player in Buffalo if he comes on board. But Julian Blackmon is not a star. He had a solid season last year. He's young. He's been productive early in his NFL career. But this guy is not what you would consider a top-tier safety in the NFL right now. And I think it's important to keep our expectations in check when we're talking about guys like Blackmon. Because I think there's this a lot of fans when we hear guys from other teams, we we mistakenly elevate them on a pedestal while we oftentimes put down a lot of our own players. Like we look at it, to switch to offense, we look at a guy like Gabe Davis and we talk him down. But if there was a Gabe Davis on another team and then he's suddenly a free agent and Buffalo was talking to that guy, we would be talking that person up. We'd be excited about being in talks with that. That's kind of how I feel about safety right now. We're talking about a lot of guys from other teams. How are they gonna fit? Blackman, I like it. I'd be happy to sign him. I don't think that guy by any means is a star at this point. Maybe he could turn into one down the line. The same thing when we're talking about guys like Simmons, Armstead. I know Armstead's not a safety, but I just want to wrap it up by saying this. The whole offseason, going into the offseason, we've been talking about needing an infusion of youth on this team. Moving on from guys on the wrong side of 30 that have big cap hits. Poyer, Morse, Trey. We've talked about how Vaughn is getting paid too much. We talk about how we're kind of stuck with Diggs going forward for the next couple years with his dead cap. Yet the first sign of having guys like Eric Armstead available, Justin Simmons available, Mike Williams available, there's a portion, and I know this is every fan base, so I'm not just saying it's the Bills, but you're seeing fans be like, oh, we should go after Armstead. We should go after Justin Simmons. No, you don't release Jordan Poyer and then replace him with a 30-year-old safety. Like you don't bring in Armstead, who's on the wrong side of 30, and pay him $17 million a year when you just did that with Von Miller. This team has 11 draft picks this year. To me, what you want is you want to bring in that infusion of youth. Do what Kansas City bit the bullet a few years ago. They ended up having to take these young guys, and they have developed them, and they are now a much better team as a result. I want them to get a lot of draft picks in this room. I want them to focus on developing, because it's not about winning a title necessarily right now or next year. You always want to put yourself in a position to win a title, but you want to make sure that 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now, this Bills team, when Josh Allen is in his 30s, can still be in a position to win championships. And if we keep betting on these older players, it's going to crash. And suddenly one day Josh Allen is going to be surrounded by nothing, and he's going to have to do it himself. And I know some people have said he's done it himself in recent years. It could get a lot worse, believe me.
It could always be worse. As Roy Collins says, let's not become the geriatric Bills. I do agree with that. I will say this. Justin Simmons is someone I don't think, while it would be a splash and he is on the wronger side of 30, I still think he could play at a high level. And I also think that the monetary commitment wouldn't be as crippling as it would with Vaughn if it didn't pan out. It still would be a lot of money. I understand the comparison you're making, but I don't think if they did decide to go for Simmons, it would be as much of like a, wow, you really did another Miller thing, as much as it's like, well, you could probably still get like 2 great years out of him and then like sign him to a 3-year deal or something with voids. But I get the point you're making. I would prefer to get younger. I'm all for the youth movement, especially when you have this much draft capital. And I think why I like these options specifically is because both of these guys are on the younger side. And that's just big for me. I mean, I think when you're talking about sustainability, athleticism, a defense that wants to hit you hard, a defense that might be trying some new things out potentially, then I'd rather get some young bodies in the room, guys that you could commit to for a few years, grow with the defense, get better over time. Again, Rapp's contract, adding him for 3, well, it's, 3 years. And then having a guy like if you brought in Edwards or Blackman, I think that's just, again, committing to younger talent, not losing sight of what you've been trying to do in this offseason, only really going for the older player if it's someone of a truly elite caliber, like an Armstead, maybe like a Simmons, and then implementing that young talent and doing a nice healthy transition of out with the old, in with the new, but not doing it all at once. And I think the Bills have set themselves up for honestly, a really big improvement or a very big miss if they don't nail this draft, because 11 picks in this draft, you got to get a decent amount. I'm not saying all 11. I'm not saying even 8 of them, but like 4 guys got to come out of this draft and be ready to play at minimum to me. Like if you can get that, and I know it's very hard to have a high success rate in a draft, but when you're talking about the philosophy of this team changing to getting younger and adding in sustainable talent, people that could be here for years forward, I want to mix in the young vets, but I also want to make sure that a lot of these draft picks are able to pan out. So I hope that they're able to do that, because if so, then you're not going to live in that world where Josh Allen has nothing and it's all crumbled around him. You'll live in a world similar to what Kansas City has built, where they've been able to just Obviously, having Mahomes helps this, but maintain a level of success. And honestly, you look at a lot of what their defense was this past year. It's a lot of, talent that maybe a mix of teams or free agents from other teams, but really a lot of homegrown guys that they have developed, they have drafted, and they have been able to fortify. And I think that same thing could happen with Buffalo if they play their cards right. And just to answer this question before we sign off, which was from DW, which says, do we know if the rumor is true that McD is going to be playing more man? So there's nothing out yet. I think they're even still deciding who's calling plays. I'm just approaching this purely from speculation based on the personnel decisions they've made, the fact that they brought in a brand new DBs coach, someone that had played from a very heavily reliant one high system in Miami, and also the fact that that defense played a lot of man. Bringing in that mind, going younger with Bobby Babich, I could 100% see them just tweaking some things. And I said this last week, I don't think this is a thing where they're going to all out switch everything, to the point where they're not even a nickel anymore. I just mean it more so like moderate tweaks, moderate changes, little things that they could throw in to, spice things up on defense, maybe get a little more complex as time goes on is really where I could see it going. But we don't know anything yet. I'll reserve judgment until I actually see it. But Mike, any final thoughts for the evening? We've been going for about an hour and 9. I think it's time to wrap it up, but I want to hear if you got anything more to say before we call it an evening here.
Yeah, the last thing I'll say about the Bills is I actually feel more confident about this team moving forward than what I did at this point last year. I felt good about the team last year. I actually picked them to go 11-6, win the AFC East, and I had them going to the AFC Championship, which they were so close to getting to. I think this is a 12-win team this season. I know a lot of people are going to focus on the guys that are gone. They're going to focus on some of the holes on this roster. I really think in sports, especially football, you have ups and downs. Rarely do you see consistency where a team is at a high level year after year after year after year. I think last year there was a lot of breaks that went against the Bills. There was a lot of bad luck in games that happened, and they also dealt with a lot of adversity. I believe the offense next year is going to go to a next level with the guys they're bringing in. I'm confident with the offensive line. I'm not really worried about McGovern moving to center. We'll see how Edwards is at left guard if he ends up starting there. But the upgrade with Curtis Samuel, I believe you're going to see another solid wide receiver entering the room, paired with a second-year Dalton Kincaid, a third-year James Cook. Like, you're talking about an offense that is getting more experienced at every critical position right now outside of one of your offensive line starters. I think they're going to carry the load big time next year. Is there going to be some holes on this defense? Absolutely. Will there be growing pains at times? Absolutely. But while we're all obsessing about who's going to be the starting safety, what are they going to do? We got to remember they still have Daquan Jones, Ed Oliver. They're going to have a healthy Matt Milano. Terrell Bernard's going to be back. Rasul Douglas, Christian Benford. Like, you go look at the other 31 defenses in the NFL, a lot of them would be dying for guys like that. So let's not over-obsess over one or two holes on the defense and say, oh, they're going to now suddenly be awful. Let's realize they still have a talent advantage versus most of their peers, and that they have one of the best coached defenses in the entire league. So even if they regress, if you put a top 10 to 12 defense with what they're going to be on offense next year, I see them being a 12-win team.
Well, I agree that I think their offense is going to have a very productive year. I think the Ken Dorsey lapses that you saw this past season, I think can be cleaned up. It's never perfect with the Bills, but I definitely think more production, more consistency is something that I'm fully expecting. And I'm very encouraged by the fact that we have a lot of young talent on that side of the ball that's still developing in a mix with veterans. But really one thing that I'm excited to see, and I talked about this last week, I'm nervous for it, but I am excited, is what that transition for McGovern to center looks like and what that could do for the line. I just trust Aaron Cromer, and the more I've thought about it, the more I'm kind of seeing the vision. And I'm really curious if that's going to enhance not only their pass protection, but their run blocking as well in those short yarded situations like we talked about. So I think their offense is poised for a big year. But one thing I'll say to that point, it would not surprise me if this was a bit of a multi-year project for the Bills as opposed to a single-year project. And I'm not saying that means that the Bills aren't going to have 10-plus wins, that the Bills are going to be a bad team, but more so that when you talk about a retooling for the Buffalo Bills, there's this part of me that kind of sees it as maybe this could be a multi-year project for both sides of the ball, where they are just slowly trying to implement more and more young talent, maybe hammering positions of need in different ways, different phases. Maybe they want to prioritize attacking one this offseason so they can attack another more heavily the next. So maybe this is the year where safety takes the backseat and they try to go hammer D linemen in this draft, or maybe they view it vice versa. But I could see a world where maybe if we don't really understand why they didn't quote unquote do more, that maybe, just maybe, it's a multi-year project where the team could still be competitive, but maybe they feel that the holes are going to be addressed as time goes on in a more progressive way. Will that happen? I don't know, man. I could be dead wrong, and this could all be fixed and we win the Super Bowl next year. I hope I am. I don't know. Listen, I speak purely from my perspective. If I'm wrong, I'm fine with being wrong. It's kind of crazy how someone could say that. But I will say this, Mike Bundt, I appreciate you being here, man. It is always a treat to get you on this show. You're a great guest. Always fun to talk to. You got things going on, and I think the people here need to know where they can find you, so let them know right now.
Yeah, you see the handle down there, Bundt Takes. If you're on YouTube, you're in this chat right now, please subscribe to my YouTube channel at Bundt Takes. I do short videos about the Bills, Sabres, anything Buffalo sports. I have credentials to cover some of the local colleges as well. These videos are short, to the point. They're not going to waste too much time. Please, 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 please take a moment, check out my YouTube channel, subscribe to it. I will not spam you with stupid stuff, I swear, unless you like shorts. YouTube shorts. And then if you want to find me on Twitter, follow me at Mike_Bundt. You'll probably like the YouTube stuff better than the Twitter stuff. I can be too much on Twitter at times, so keep a warning with that.
You'll catch Mike in Narnia sometimes giving you takes, and it's always entertaining. I love when I see the great pasture in the background. But no, Mike, it's always appreciated to have you here. I mean, I love hearing your takes. I love talking to you. So this was a lot of fun. Guys in the chat, I mean, what more could be said? I say it every week, but you guys are awesome. I really appreciate all the feedback, all the comments, agreements, disagreements. You know, you're always appreciated. Love seeing you guys here. Hope you guys can be back next week because, of course, with the free agency cycle and draft season kicking in, there are more episodes coming your way. And we are going to be talking about so many things, position breakdowns for prospects in this draft that could be fits for the Bills like we did with our receiver episodes, and hopefully more big news that comes along the way. So for me, I am just going to say my name is Joe DeRosa. You can find me on Twitter at @show_DeRosa. Once again, thank you all so much. Drop a like on your way out. The One Pass sign up is in the description below. So if you are interested, please give that a look. Sign up. You are going to get access to some awesome things if you do. But this was Under Review. I appreciate you all so much again. I hope you all have a great night. Let's see if more news happens this week. And as always, go Bills. Happy Tuesday. We will see you soon. Good night.